What if your next chapter begins when you stop doing and start leading? Sometimes leadership doesn't start with a title. It starts with a choice. Today, Walter Dusseldorp, the Dutch mentor, shares how a single moment at 14 shaped a lifetime of service, leadership, and growth. From the farms of Holland to hospital boardrooms and helicopter flights, Walter shows what it really means to lead with humility, purpose, and rhythm. This is the Your Next Success podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Carolyn Sangal. I'm a life-first career coach and strategist on a mission to normalize questioning your career. Because I believe each of us is made on purpose for a purpose only we can fulfill. The longer we live out of alignment with who we are, what we do best, and why we're here, the more we miss out, and the more the world misses out on what only we can give. The Your Next Success podcast is where we explore how to build a career that truly fuels your life. We talk about self-discovery, smart job search strategies, professional growth, and you'll hear stories from people who've navigated big career transitions themselves, so you can see what it's really like to make bold changes and feel inspired to create your own version of authentic success, one that is aligned, meaningful, and truly yours. Today's guest is Walter Dusseldorp, also known as the Dutch mentor. Walter is a lifelong learner, paramedic, flight instructor, author, and founder of thedutchmentor.com, where he helps professionals bridge the gap between doing and leading through self-awareness, operational rhythm, and emotional intelligence. He's led teams of more than 2,000 people, coached countless leaders, and built a life centered around service and mentorship. From the farms of Holland to hospital boardrooms and helicopter flights, Walter's story is a masterclass in humility, courage, and purpose. In this episode, Walter shares how a single moment at 14, holding a dying farmer in his arms, set him on a lifelong path to serve and lead. We talk about how true leadership begins with awareness, why emotional intelligence is a muscle, and how to find rhythm and grace in the middle of responsibility. Whether you're leading a team or learning to lead yourself, this conversation will remind you that great leadership starts from the inside out. Welcome, Walter, to Your Next Success. I am absolutely thrilled to be having this conversation with you today.
Carolyn, welcome, and thank you for inviting me. It's been a great journey up to this point in time, and sometimes you come across wonderful people, and I'm sure that we're going to have a great conversation today about our next success, but first reflecting back on our past successes and mistakes.
Good. That's great. I've been looking forward to this for a long time because I think it's so cool, some of the things that you have been able to do and the ways you've contributed thus far. But let's take it way back toward almost the beginning. Tell me a little bit, like, where did you grow up? What was it like as a child? What kind of things were you involved in? That type of thing.
Sure, absolutely. So the Dutch mentor is not because I'm born and raised in New York City and came up with a fancy name. I actually was born and raised in Holland. So I was raised, I was born in Rotterdam, a big, large city in Holland. And then shortly after, I moved to a very small farmer's village because it was easier for my father to travel for business throughout the country. Now, mind you, Holland is not that big, so it's like an hour and a half to any side of the country. But I grew up in there as a kid that was kind of like from the city, not fitting all that well into the farmer's village itself. It took a lot of problems, barriers, struggles, especially as a teenager. But one thing I became sure is that I always found things interesting in the sense that I wanted to learn. So I worked on a farm. I milked cows. I worked at the butcher. I slaughtered animals and prepped food. I worked in the hotel and restaurant business. I participated in all kinds of sports. I was always open to learning new things as I was going to school. But I was really struggling as a teenager with my own identity. I wasn't quite sure who I was or what I wanted to be. But in the background, there were two significant events that happened to me and that have played out for the rest of my life. First, as a 14-year-old riding my bicycle home from school, an elderly farmer crossed the street and he got hit by a car. And I was the
Oh,
first on scene, and I picked him up and he literally was dying in my arms. And I felt completely hopeless. I said, all I can do is provide him comfort, but I was not able to help him. And I said at that point in time, I said, I'll never be in that position again. And that sparked my interest in the world of medicine at that moment in time. And I've never let go of that. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. The second thing, in our village, which is right on the border of Germany, every Tuesday and Thursday, NATO F-16 fighters would have dogfighting exercises over our countryside. So you would have been screaming jets going over with sonic booms from time to time. Not supposed to happen, but in case it did. And I was fascinated with flying. I said, listen, someday I want to be up in that aircraft. So connecting those two pieces as I went forward, I had an opportunity to go to America in 1987 to visit family. And then I came back the year after that, in 1988, and I stayed. I worked in a small camp upstate New York. I'm going to stay. I had a visa. I was able to stay for a period of time as a student. And then one thing led to another. And we can take the conversation from this point forward wherever you wanted to go. But that's how I went to America. Those are my fundamental experience that helped me, that generated the interest in both medicine and flying.
Wow, that's so cool, though. Even at 14, you went toward a life-threatening situation. Many, many people would have just bolted and gone the other way or been like, I don't know. But what was it that you think compelled you to go and try to provide help, or definitely provide as much comfort as you could?
Yeah, I mean, it partly is instinctual, right? Whenever there was an emergency, whenever I heard sirens, whenever I saw police, fire, EMS, I would run to it, never away from it. So this was not surprising. Something happened in front of me, I would run to it to see if I could help out in any way. Not out of curiosity, out of genuine care. Interesting enough, a lot of the things that I even do today in leadership today, I can bring it right back to the farm. Pick up 60, 70 cows and half a mile away from the barn to get them, to milk them in the morning, is really allows you to lead with humility.
Yeah.
Because it will set you straight in a heartbeat, right? You'll have 70, 80% of that will follow you back to the stall, while the other 20% will resist. Well, now you have to deploy some real leadership skills in order to entice the last few ones to come back to the barn as well. Of course, part of farming is birthing, and part of farming is injury. So from a young age, I was able to help out with birthing calves. And on occasion, you needed to have a C-section. I was always fascinated with the part of medicine, initially in veterinary medicine, then in more human medicine. I had a phenomenal doctor, the traditional Dutch doctor, would come to your house when you were sick. He would come in his little bag with a blood pressure cuff and a stethoscope.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated by that. So connecting all those pieces, I had not taken action until after that event. It was after the event I said, listen, you know what, I should get my first aid license. And I joined what we call AHBO, which is the first aid office in Holland. And I started volunteering my time with them. And the thought process at that point, I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a trauma surgeon. And then, of course, my own personal difficulties of really understanding myself as a teenager, even into early adulthood. I had too many distractions, and that led me to come to America. Actually let go of EMS, emergency services, for the first couple of years. Owned a bakery, delicatessen, and pizzeria by the time I was 19, 20 years old. But that fire was lit inside of me, and it wasn't until that point in time I discovered here in the United States that most villages have their own fire department, their own ambulance services. So I joined it at that point in time. And that's where I got reconnected to my true passion. And that's when I ended up going back after I got married to become a paramedic. And then, of course, it was a journey of 30 plus years working as a paramedic, flight paramedic, while I went back to school in my mid-30s to get all my degrees and started thinking about how can I contribute in a way, not directly patient one-to-one care, but how can I affect people who take care of people? Therefore, you can affect hundreds of thousands of people. And that's how the journey started.
Oh, wow. And now when you were little, your dad was traveling for business. What did he do? What was your initial snapshot of this is work and this is success? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, the success was, he was an engineer, so he would travel throughout the country to work sites. I often traveled with him. And I paid very close attention to the kind of work that was being done, especially architectural and construction. And so I built my own houses. I've designed properties and structures. So I learned a lot along the way. But see one, do one, teach one. That was the philosophy, so to speak. And my father was one of these people that he would not subcontract anything at home. So he was always making things out. Don't get me wrong. My relationship with my father was very difficult because he was a super, super smart man. I would even say he was a savant. He was, even in modern terms, you'd say maybe he was even on the spectrum a little bit. But very successful in his own right, super smart, way ahead of most people. But I, as a teenager, had a difficult time relating to that because I was not as smart as he was. And I would not get tens or what we call 4.0 on every single assignment that I had. And the question was never about, hey, good job on the 90. Why did you not know the other 10%? And so I learned a lot of things. I said as a father, I will never do those. Of course, as you become a father, many of the things that he has done and taught, you start doing them, but maybe in a more EQ-driven fashion. Because I think some of the fundamentals he taught were really good. It was just the way he went about doing it was not conducive to me as a teenager, which caused a lot of struggles. And essentially speaking, caused me to leave the country and go somewhere else, much to the chagrin of my mother, by the way. So she was not.
I imagine. Now, did you have any siblings?
No, I came by myself. I have two sisters, one older, one younger. They are both still in Holland and doing well. I came here by myself, barely spoke the language, and literally came to America with a small rucksack. I had $500, of which I spent probably $350 on buying a camera in the streets of New York City, which ended up being nothing else but a box of wet paper towels.
Oh.
I ended up going to camp with almost no money. So I can truly say whatever I have done in life is truly made through hard work, labor, and sweat, blood, and tears.
What did you do at the camp? What was that opportunity?
Well, the interesting part is they hire you as a camp power, and you were supposed to go work inside the camp. It's in Camp Friendswood, the Performing Arts, a great, phenomenal place for city kids to go up and really learn their art, for anything from dance to instrument to acrobatic and circus. Interesting, as a young man, I was struggling with drinking too much, smoking too much, maybe dipping a little bit into weed. And I thought, listen, if I go here, I get to go on campus and I can do anything. It's a great time for me to have a hard reset and not do any of these things. Of course, I got to the camp and Jimmy picked me up in Hancock, New York, and he said, shut up, sit down. He says, you don't know shit functional, do as I say, not as I do. He said, what is all of me? But the part was when he dropped me off, I lived in a house just off campus. And I walk in and there's literally 30 other guys from England and Ireland and other parts of Europe with nothing else but beer cans, pot smell, smoking. As an 18-year-old, I thought I walked into heaven and said, okay, I guess my full reset to my new normal or my new me can wait a little longer. So it took a bunch of months and meeting new people when I finally said at 19 years old, somebody said, literally, I went to an AA meeting in Binghamton, New York, and the guy said to me, he says, so I want you to sit down, I want you to relate, not compare. And I quit drinking that day and I have the alcohol since. I do have an occasional beer or wine taste, but I don't consume any alcohol of any regularity. And for over almost 28 years, I never drank a drop of alcohol.
How did you even know that there was something like AA? I mean, I guess you had this desire to get yourself clean without any extra substances. You had that even when coming, but how did you, not knowing the language, not knowing the culture, how did you even know that existed?
Well, I did not know, and the cultural acceptance. Europe is very different than drinking alcohol in the United States, right? We have beer by the time we're 11, 12 years old with Chinese food and a glass of wine with other types of food. It is when you start drinking for the wrong reasons, right, when it becomes problematic. So I happened to live after the camp was over with two people who were in recovery, and they exposed me first to their journey. And of course, he started watching me as I worked for him in a hotel, bar, and restaurant, by the way, on how I was in my patterns of thinking and my patterns of drinking. And he said, listen, I think you might have a problem. Why don't you come with me? And the first time I went to a local place and there was a bunch of old guys sitting around talking about BS, I said, that's not me. I got some partying to do. And I went back, and it wasn't not until 4 months later when he took me to Binghamton to a youth group. Now, he was a certified alcohol counselor himself, so he was able to see, And the fortune was this, right? I went there and he told me that sit down, relating, don't compare, which is something that I use in my mentorship and coaching program all the time. We
Yeah.
tend to compare while we should be learning to relate. That's one. Two, I ended up going to work because I was waiting for my green card to be processed after I got married. I was volunteered my time at the Family Foundation in Hancock, New York. And there I met a whole group of people that were guiding and young kids from New York City who were sent there by judges that either it was jail or rehab. And in there, I learned the 12-step program and lived with them during the day and at home. But I met a wonderful Catholic priest or Franciscan brother, Father Anthony Moore. And although I am not a very religious person, I'm Roman Catholic, and I do go to church today because my son is asking me, and I found grace in that and doing that with him together. But Father Anthony Moore made a real deep impression on me from a spiritual standpoint. And that really helped me to analyze myself, who I was, and really tried finding myself. So I was always a really hard worker. I was always open to learning and doing new things, but I was going about it the wrong way, right? There's somebody once said this, you get what you want, even if it takes stepping over a dead body. And that was true. So that's not leading with humility. That's leading with arrogance and sense of superiority. So early on, I learned to lead with humility and to be more open-minded, more giving, to elevate my EQ, so to speak. And through those processes, you learn to become a better parent, a better store manager, or a better paramedic, and a better flight paramedic, a better husband, a better father. And of course, I've had plenty of pitfalls along the way, but I've always tried to learn from each one of them.
What do you think it was about some of these early people that you chose to emulate as mentors that allowed you to be open to their advice? Was it that they had EQ versus your father, maybe not so much, was just more direct? Because anyone goes through that ego transition, and I know it all, to then maybe later softening up and realizing, oh, there's a whole lot I don't know. But what do you think it was about those certain leaders that allowed you the ability to be a little vulnerable and realize you had growth that needed to be done?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting, right? So today, as I'm more mature and you reflect back upon that, and I've written about that, by the way, in books that I've published, I think that you continue to look for a father figure in your life. So somebody who is more authoritative, but with a softer touch, a more understanding touch. So certainly the people who have played major roles in my life, initially Danny helping me find myself, Father Anthony Moore to really install some principles and morals, and Mike Sr., Mike Jr., they all had impacts. But these were all like father-like figures, people who I could respect and look up to. None of them were perfect by any means, other than Father Anthony Moore. He was a pretty good guy. It is something you could look up to and then try to emulate to some extent. And over time, you have to continue to shape. But to make something great, you can't do that overnight. It's like building a culture. And a culture requires a continuous assessment and reshaping until you get it to the point where you want it to be. So I've had wonderful mentors along the way. Mike Versina, Mark Oborn, Kirk Oborn, and a handful of other folks who really have had a significant impact on me and how I think, how I present myself, how I represent my personal brand, and how I try to impact the people that I lead or the people who I mentor today.
Now, tell me, how did the flight thing come back into the picture? You had these visions of these super cool jets while you're little. You had this desire. You started to do the paramedic stuff, but then where did the flight part come back into the picture to have that opportunity?
Sure. Really, 9/11 happened, and at that point, I responded to that. And I actually had to make a phone call home and said, by the way, I'm going into the city to take care of patients. I'm not sure I will be coming home. Because at that point in time, we did not know. That was probably the most emotional call I've ever made. I had 3 young kids at home. And obviously, there were no patients to be treated. There was a horrible day for all of us. And I think, verbatim, but we could remember where we were, what we did. And sadly, a couple of my partners who lost their spouses during that event. And over time, by the way, people who did respond to and stayed there for the time, people have been significantly medically affected by that. But that's another story. So aviation. So once that took place, as a foreigner with a green card, immediately there were restrictions put into place. Who could become a pilot in the United States? I said to myself, it's like, this is a life-altering event. If I ever wanted to do this, now is the time to do it before somebody tells me I can't do it. So I went out a week or two later And I said, we all need to live life. You can't just live to work. And I went to flight school and got my private fixed wing license within a year after that. So I flew with the Quaid Flight School, which is no longer in existence. Gary Quaid and he was 6'5", I'm 6'5", in a very compact Cherokee 140. We had lots of good time, but he taught me how to become a good flyer. And it was 4 or 5 years later when I joined a Step Flight Helicopter as a flight paramedic, where I really fell in love with flying a helicopter. Of course, flying an airplane is affordable. Flying a helicopter is almost unaffordable, right? The expense of that is really significant. But I really kind of got caught that bug. And then, of course, as the kids get older and they become teenagers and they have to go to college, you have to shift priorities and it costs a lot of money. So I left aviation. I did not fly myself for probably a good 5 to 8 years. Without an occasion, I would take a ride with somebody. And it wasn't until after that was completed that I went back into aviation, first fixed wing, and then I had an opportunity to pursue my helicopter license. And that's what I did. So for the last 4 or 5 years, I've flown probably about 200 to 300 hours altogether. I've got my certified flight instructor instrument rating for my helicopter and currently working on the same add-on ratings for my fixed wing with the goal to have it all done by first quarter of next year. And then I can start teaching. So that's really where the combination of my true loves, right? I can no longer work as a one-to-one care provider because of a neck and a back injury, but now I can work with healthcare providers who are taking care of patients and thereby affecting hundreds, if not thousands of people. And I get to go out and teach new aviators who are still on the bottom rung of pursuing their ultimate dream in aviation. And I think that is really the purpose in our lives, is it's really faith, family, and then the values, and then pursue the things that make us happy. And that is, of course, for me, it was emergency services and aviation.
So many nuggets there. I try to say, sometimes people say the things that influence your career is the title, the salary, the location, right? I'll say a career is like an iceberg. That's above the surface. But below the surface, that iceberg goes down 4 or 5 times deep. And to me, it's who are you? What do you do best? What would you like your life to look like? And how can your career fuel that life in addition to what's the chatter in your head? When I try to help people make their vision for their life or their career, there's 8 factors. Where are you in your career development stage? What are your natural abilities? The skills, the things that you invested time, effort, and energy to learn. Your interests, what fascinates you. Your personal style. Are you introvert, extrovert, generalist, specialist? The family you come from and the family you have now, your goals, your values. All of these things come together. And in that, I heard many of these influences. You paused some of the flying when you had kids because of the expense and some other things, and then you bring it back now. The interests that have been there and the abilities and the skills, all of these things are all very well demonstrated by your story. So I have the flight component. I have a lot of the leadership influences and aspects. And you touched a little bit, but then how did you get into care administration, those leadership, because you led some pretty big organizations?
Yeah. So as my dreams, that's what I always remind people, that we need to dream big and act small, right? So my dream ultimately became to a vision of becoming an executive leader of an organization where I could help shape the future of healthcare from sick care to well care. And that's really why, and when I was in my 30s, I was sitting on the couch at Medic 3 in Rockland County with my partner, Bernadette, and said, what are we going to do next? I said, I got 3 kids, eventually 5 kids. I said, I can just be a paramedic and work 3-4 nights a week or 60, 70, 80 hours across 2 different jobs. I need to do something else. So she went back to school to become an emergency manager. I went back to school and got my bachelor's in management and economics, immediately enrolled into an executive MBA program in New York City, and graduated from that. While I was doing that, I convinced the local hospital to hire me as a liaison between emergency services and the healthcare. Once I got there and showed them what I was able to accomplish, they quickly gave me more work, which within, I think, 4 or 5 months, ended up being a full-time job. And that's where my journey in healthcare leadership started. So initially, it was about safety and trauma and stroke, and then it was about facilities management, facilities administration across many different departments. And eventually that led to the opportunity to go into New York City and work for New York City Health and Hospital as a service line executive across 2 academic hospitals. And that team grew from hundreds of people to well over 1,000 people. And every step of the way, as I continued to grow as a leader, I had an opportunity to affect people. But one of the things that was installed in me early on is that, sadly, over 60% of the people go to work every single day not loving what they do.
Yeah.
And that's a shame, right? Because you spend 40 years of your life in a job that you don't like, and you only get one life to live. So my mission to myself was always, I want to be purpose-driven. So yes, the paycheck helps me and it pays the bills, but money was never my driver. It was always about what kind of impact could I have? And again, remember, I wanted to be the CEO. So as I started climbing the career ladder in the positions that I held, as a leader, I clearly was able to demonstrate that we were able to activate passion, purpose, mission, and performance that was having real impact on patients. But I also ran into problems that in the organization that I was in, I didn't look like some of the people. And there were clear understanding, and somebody told me, listen, Walter, I don't think you will ever be the CEO here because you are not A, B, C, and D. And I had to learn to accept that was fine. And I'm okay with that, right? Sometimes that happens. So instead of letting it determine my future, and I could have worked there for the next 20 years and been very happy because the mission was phenomenal. I still buy into it today and a lot of the people that I work with, but there are certain limitations. But I decided at that point in time to transition after an opportunity presented to myself to go into the corporate world, the for-profit world, which I had never touched before. Now, that's where you've switched from mission-driven to profit-driven. And I will tell you, although I joined a team that was in shambles, rated 6th out of 6 regions, and after 3.5 years of working there, we were either number 1 or 2 in all metrics across the board. So we were very successful in the mission itself. I did not like the feeling of what we needed to do to meet the bottom line on a quarterly basis, and always in the fourth quarter, always before Christmas, always required people, a massive amount of people to be laid off in order to save money. And I really did not like that. And then COVID happened and we really worked really hard, and that provided me with a runway that allowed me to go out and say, listen, you wouldn't continue to pursue myself on the road to a CEO. I'm going to open up my own, which I had already been doing in the background for many years on a part-time basis. So I want to dive in full-time into the deep end. I want to go and become a professional coach and mentor to middle managers, to emerging leaders, people who go from doing to leading but are stuck in that valley of despair. That's where the real opportunity is. And people say, why is that? Isn't it better to go to talk to executives? I do that too, but they're often already very cemented in place. The future leaders, the future of healthcare, and it goes right back to my mission early on. If we truly want to go from sick care to well care, we need to change the way we think.
Yeah.
And that will be done by the next generation. So me working with 35 to 55-year-olds who are managers or supervisors all the way to AVP level, they can bring to think differently and become highly functional leaders with high EQ, servant-type leadership style. That will lead to the outcomes that I would desire, where people can be creative and innovative, but always know and always care for the people that they lead. Because on the end of the day, it is our people who are our most valuable asset. And if we get them to buy into the mission and get them to believe and buy into it through trust and engagement, that's where true high performance comes from.
How do those types of middle managers, are you working for the hospitals or the systems that have the leaders, or do you work with individual leaders who approach you on the side? Who's choosing you as the leader for the leaders?
So I will say brilliant executive leaders who are willing to not only admit that they can't do it themselves, not only admit that leadership development is the key to their success and organization success, but those leaders who are vulnerable enough to take the action step to hire people like me to come in and help their organization on a one-to-one or small team basis in order to, over an extended period of time, to change the culture, to change the way they do business, to create new habits and behaviors, and it is focused around 15 minutes a day of self-assessment and weekly cadence of accountability and driving outcomes. That's the person that I work for, and that's the person I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, sadly, 95% of executive leaders believe in what I just said, but only 5% take meaningful action, meaning that they are using this as a checkbox, I am doing it, and often it's done by HR, which is not the best place to get anything done. And what they do is they put a cohort together of people who will go on a fellowship or a leadership development course over a period of time to either in-person meetings or conferences or online classes. The problem is that the representation of that group is so small compared to the group of middle managers that actually work for that organization. For example, 90% of the front line works for a middle manager. Well, middle managers are people who are promoted most likely from doing high-performing teams, but then they don't give them any kind of support. And the bachelor and the master's means nothing because they don't teach the leadership in those classes. They teach you theory. And so putting it together. And out of that group of middle managers, 1% of them get put into these classes, leaving all the other ones to struggle. So that's why I would say to your individuals, listen, it is time to grab the bull by the horn. You need to admit to yourself that you need to make an investment in self. So I do one-to-one opportunities where I meet with people on a weekly basis. We talk about real issues and we take real action steps, including measurement and self-accountability on a weekly basis. And out of that, I've developed my mobile app called SMART. S is for self-care, M is for mindful growth, A is for adaptive learning, R is for rhythmic operations, T is for thriving community, and P is for performance, where they get to now self-pace through the program. It's sort of an accelerated program. They can do it as a standalone, or they can do it combined with a coaching opportunity. And that's really where the greatest opportunity, and remember that people always have to remind themselves, I am in charge of my own career.
Yeah.
Right? I have to take the actions. I cannot sit back and wait for somebody else to do it. If you're lucky enough to be politically connected or to be truly in the top 1%, kudos, good for you. But the shortfall even there is this. They go to these programs and it is 1 year in, 1 year out. And the test is this. When was the last time you went to a conference? When was the last time you took a class? Tell me now, 4 days later, it's only a month or 6 months later, what did you learn? And they will not remember 95%.
Yeah.
And then the follow-up question is, what action did you take that created new normals in your organization? And less than 1% have taken meaningful action. So all that stuff looks good on paper, but it accomplishes very little. Again, the philosophy is not about coaching. Coaching is more strategic. It's about mentorship. And leaders need to first admit that I don't have the time to effectively mentor anybody. Because they cancel most of their one-to-ones. And the annual performance evaluation is a complete waste of time. Because that's dusting off a plan, talking about things again and again, and putting it back on the shelf. So we as leaders need to think differently, to take different actions to get different outcomes. And that's where the space that I work in.
Imagine what your life would be like if your career aligned with who you are, what you do best, and actually fueled the life you want. At Next Success, we support all ages and stages through career transitions, from students exploring majors or careers to job seekers actively searching or reimagining their next move to professionals committed to self-awareness and leadership growth. Stay connected and explore what's possible at nextsuccesscareers.com and follow Next Success Method on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook.
You mentioned EQ a lot of times. How do you assess and then help people to develop that absolutely essential skill?
Yeah, so EQ is important because it first starts with self-awareness, right? People need to become far more self-aware. And I asked the first question, said, tell me a little bit about yourself. And they will go on a 5-minute tirade that has no beginning, middle, and to it. That shows me right out of the gate that most people have very little self-awareness. Or people come out and say, and that is certainly the opposite of self-awareness, and that's more of leading with ego, pride, and a sense of superiority. So EQ, we need to see this as a muscle. Everybody has EQ. It's just, is it activated or not? And so the self-assessment is, I go through the pace. I have a couple of different programs I use, or very simplistic things that people need to do to come to understand who they are as leaders. What are my strengths? What are my blind spots? What should I do more of? How can I really assess this? EQ is a muscle. It requires work every day to either build it up and solely to maintain it. So first thing is it's not about I, it's about we. It's not about inward, but outward. So yes, we have to start with inward looking and development, but once you have that stabilized, you really need to be outward looking. So one of the first fundamentals of leadership is to love the people that you lead. And that requires you to make time, to make it a priority to get to know the people that you lead, to spend quality time with them with no distractions, to show love and appreciation and development opportunities, either through yourself or hiring somebody to do it for you. And there's a whole bunch of the other ingredients that go into this. But EQ is not just a soft skill. EQ is part of the mentality, part of the culture of an organization where people matter. They're just not widgets in a larger factory.
Now, there's also something about you being a professor. What's that? So you are just like all about teaching and leading and affecting as many people as possible.
Well, I would never proclaim that I'm a professor, although people do call me that. I teach at Rutgers University a healthcare leadership course, an introductory, because that's where they first get introduced to health and help them understand. And I likely will teach other courses in the future there. But it's like a side gig to stay engaged and to really pay it forward again, right? Is the way to do it. What I also do is I teach fellowship programs. In other words, I encourage all healthcare leaders or any leader in any world to become part of their professional organization. So we have the American Council of Healthcare Executives, and they have a board certification called the Fellow of the Board of American Council of Healthcare Executive. It's actually one of the most difficult exams out there, equivalent to a CPA exam. 230 questions, takes 5.5, 6 hours to take. 50% of the people fail it the first time around. So I teach a cohort journey. So I take people on a 10 to 12 week journey and help them prepare for the test. It requires a lot of not only inside the ground across the continuum of healthcare, but it really is a lot about behavior. Even though I don't use the word behavior with them, but subliminally, I'm teaching them how to establish a behavior of success where they can focus in on something and really try to analyze what do I know, what I don't know, and then go on that journey of continuous learning and dedication. And interesting enough, after a week or two, I know exactly who in that class will finish. I know exactly who will get it the first time, and if not, the second time. It's very predictable.
What are the qualities that make someone finish versus not? As you're observing these people, what are the things that distinguish those types of leaders and finishers in your mind?
So number one is, do they have the camera on when in class? So way too many meetings are taking place across organizations where people are not mandated to have the cameras on. So as soon as the camera goes off, your eyes go to your phone, to this stupid little thing over here, and you start texting and emailing and paying attention. Once you are not listening anymore, and remember, the brain is a complex where we can barely walk and chew gum at the same time. So if you are taking your attention elsewhere, you can no longer pay attention to the conversation. Therefore, you only absorb partial, and it either leads to rework by saying, can you say that again? Or I didn't quite understand. Well, if you would have listened the first time and had allowed to process the information. So that's number one. Number two is people who participate in bi-directional conversation. Right now, of course, those people who always have the first word, who are lead with a sense of arrogance, also quickly can fall into that category that you're not wise enough. And it's not that you're not smart enough. You're not wise enough to put it all together and come across the finish line. But those people who are committed, are on camera, listen, participate, complete the work, ask follow-up questions, will send me an email check-in. Those are the ones who are most likely going to finish the course. And then certainly those who book a test within 3 months after are more likely to be successful than anybody else. And I tell them, right, what does a journey of success look like? And I give them data points on what I can see. I think it's like we have a 75% success rate of those people who follow the script, passed it first time around 75%. That's 25% better than national average. That's pretty significant.
Yeah.
And the people who go back for the second time, probably 90% who go back for the second time, pass it the second time around. So it is significantly better than what the national average is. And again, it's a teaching style or the structure. And again, it's subliminally and sometimes even outwardly It's the behavior of people that holds us back or creates our own successes.
And so I've heard a lot about some of these behaviors you're mentioning. So, you know, setting a goal, continuing to go back and look at the goal, not just at performance review time, trying to make sure that you're doing the habits, spending quality time with the people, listening to them, actually getting to know them, loving them. What are some of the other behaviors that you've noticed that distinguish emerging or excellent leaders versus those who are ego, self, just not really in it?
Well, the people who don't call you and they don't seek mentorship from anybody are the ones who fall into that category, right? They have to self-discover still, and they continue to scratch their head why they don't get to the second or third round of final interview process for a new role that they seek. So often we don't even hear or see from them. Others who join the program, I can clearly see that of the people who join me and they start learning to measure their own performance on a daily basis, accelerate by a significant amount versus those who only measure themselves on occasion or don't measure themselves at all. So you can go through all of the materials, all of the action steps, all of the exercise, all the actions. Again, my program is action-based. It's not just one's a theory or fluff. You should be taking small actions on a daily basis that should be self-assessed and how well you do it, which you can do in the app or you can do on a piece of paper, but you have to do it. Those people who meet with me on a weekly basis in conjunction with that, and they present to me their scorecard, or I go to the app and look them up for that during the meeting and see how well they track themselves, without a single doubt, they perform better than everybody else. So the magic of behavior is this, right? The sooner you come to the acceptance that on December 31st, when you're going to be this wonderful person the next year, and you're going to exercise, you run out and get that membership at the local gym, and understand that you will go 3 times the first week, and twice the second week, and once the third week, and then you go back 4 more times for the next entire year. The sooner you come to the realization that most of you are just like that in everything else that you do, and that's the root cause why 70 to 80% of the things we set out for ourselves personally or professionally never reach its full potential. And the sooner you come to the realization it's not your technical skills, but it is your behavior that holds you back, the quicker you can make a turnaround, and to go on that successive step of performance for cause that will more likely than not lead to the outcomes that you desire.
Now, your coaching and your app, is it only for those related to healthcare, or is it anybody interested in improving their leadership?
No, it is completely agnostic to industry. I just happen to spend probably 70, 80% of the time with people in healthcare, but I work with people across the full spectrum, from technology to finance to entrepreneurs to production companies. It doesn't make a difference because the rules of engagement are exactly the same. You need to have self-awareness. You need to take care of yourself. You need to know and understand what the DNA of a highly effective leader is. You need to understand how you can solve problems or root causes. You need to understand how to set up a rhythmic operation so you have more predictable outcomes, where real growth comes from. And you can never do it alone. You have to be involved in a thriving community. And then once that is all said, there's 6 metrics. It is safety, quality, growth, cost, transformation, and continuous learning, continuous development, improvement is standard for all industries. So the quicker you can conceptualize these and take meaningful action on them in order of priority, and I can do this with a team, I can do this with individuals. It is across any industry, and the app is autonomous. You buy into it, you get into it, you go on a journey, and you make a decision for yourself if you should have a further investment in getting mentorship. I've seen if you do that, a short period or long period of time, you definitely will do better than if you don't. But this can be done on your own as well, as long as you show the dedication and the self-discipline to assess. All of my mobile apps comes with an open coaching call on a weekly basis, Tuesdays from 2:30 to 3 o'clock at no additional cost. So they all have an opportunity to join the thriving community and have and discuss on a deeper level 1 topic per week.
Now, how do people find you? How do somebody, if they've heard some exciting things and they're like, yeah, this Dutch mentor is my mentor, how can they get to know you?
Yeah, great. I mean, I welcome people to come join me on on any of my social media platforms. Just look it up, The Dutch Mentor, on LinkedIn, under my name, Walter Dusseldorp, The Dutch Mentor. You can find me on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. I post every single day little nuggets, even 3-minute leadership lessons at no additional cost. Again, I believe in paying it forward. I don't believe in selling. I believe in relationship building and referral-based opportunities. And the thing is, all of our responsibility is to share experience. That's why I wrote many books. You can go to Amazon, just type in my name, and I think there's 26 publications there. And none of them cost very much, but I promise you that each one of them will add value and insight to your life that you can convert into whatever it is your dream is.
Last question. I'm really big on authentic success. And to
Yes.
me, authentic success is however you define it to be. So how would you define authentic success for yourself in this moment?
So the key for me, and when you say authentic, is you don't get into a box and stay there because somebody told you have to stay in that box. As time progresses, as you get older, as your brain matures, you might need to transform. Never give up on your dream, and that dream can change over time, but you have to dream. You have to think into the future and then take meaningful steps every single day. Have the courage to take bold steps outside of that box, for one. Two, you do not and should not go at it alone. So find a coach and a mentor to work with, either volunteer or even make that investment in yourself in order to do that. Listen, you got to be calculated. You got to be risk. You take some calculated risk in the process itself, but don't get lazy because you have only one life to live, and it is your role to be a role model and also to inspire others, including yourself. And that might require you to go a different avenue that you have traveled before.
Walter, this has been such an amazing, just jam-packed full of wisdom and actionable items for listeners to be able to do. I want to thank you so very much for sharing your time, part of your story, and so many nuggets and wisdom. I definitely appreciate it.
Carolyn, thank you very much for the invitation. It was my pleasure, and I look forward to connecting in the future. Good luck with your next success podcast series. You can come join mine sometime in the near future as well.
Oh, I would love to. I would be happy to. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Walter, thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom. If this conversation inspired you to pause, reflect, and lead differently, connect with Walter at thedutchmentor.com and follow The Dutch Mentor on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. You can also explore his Smart Performance app and leadership books on Amazon. If you love this episode, share it with someone ready to step from doing into leading. Thanks for listening to Your Next Success with Dr. Carolyn Sangal. Remember, authentic success is yours to define and includes aligning your career to support the life you want.